Little known fact about me, I actually went to New York one time. Yeah, I did all the things that people do when they go to the Big Apple. I saw the Free Lady statue, the Bone Museum, Square Times, this cool bird that I took a picture of. But if you ever find yourself stuck in the York of New, the greatest and coolest thing to do is definitely visiting the Balto statue. Balto was a real dog who participated in a sled run along with other mushers and huskies to bring diphtheria antitoxin to the snowbound town of Nome, Alaska, which was currently going through an epidemic. The heroic deeds of those animals and their trainers were immortalized through this American monument, which stands for the resilience and courage exhibited by all of those involved. But for 12-year-old me, it mostly stood for the Cool Dog movie. The animated Balto film was released in 1995 to a very underwhelming box office performance, but it eventually found success in future video releases, which is how my family became aware of it. This movie became such a staple in terms of home entertainment for me that I was always shocked when I referenced it elsewhere and no one outside of my family circle knew what I was talking about. So I either had to get better friends or educate them on the cinematic masterpiece, and since I'm making a video now, I guess I'm choosing the latter. And I don't know, something about a dangerous illness ravaging a town and being defeated by the power of cooperation and courage is just really speaking to me at the moment. I wonder why. Follow me to the snowy depths of inaccurate historical adaptations because I want to talk about Balto. The film opens with a live-action sequence of— wait, Phil Collins was in this? Is this a musical? We open with an old lady walking through Central Park along with her grandchild, apparently looking for some sort of landmark. They're having a bit of trouble finding it, so the grandma sits down to tell the kid a story about a town who was saved by dog sledding. That's when we meet the titular Balto, a stray dog who is one of the fiercest animals in the area, but he is cast aside by others due to the fact that he is half-wolf and thus considered dangerous. Other notorious dogs include Steel, the fastest and evilest husky in town, and Jenna, the kind pet of one of the local children, who is named Rosie. And here, we already start to see where this movie went right. The designs of the dogs. I really love the way they look. Of course, there's the surface level analysis of how their designs are very appropriate for their personalities, with Jenna being pretty and well-groomed, Balto looking a bit more scraggly, and Steel looking like if a cop was a dog, and the animation itself reflects this really well. It's clearly cartoony and stylized, with those big ol' expressive eyes, but you can see that a lot of care went into how each of those characters is represented. With how many times I watched this film as a kid, I'm surprised it didn't inspire me to draw cool dogs. Like, at this point, it's anyone's guess why I didn't turn out to be a furry. They also really struck gold with the voice acting. Jenna is played by Bridget Fonda, and she brings such a lovely kindness to the role. Everything Jenna says is so beautifully soft-spoken, and yet there's an underlying fury to it.
Steele's lying. Balto's alive. He's coming home.
Steel is also wonderfully played by Jim Cummings, who was cast with the explicit purpose of sounding mean. Apparently they were going to bring in Brendan Fraser of all people for the role, but they made the switch in order to highlight, and I quote, a clearer sense of Steel's inherent evil, and they totally nailed it.
Touch that box, and I'll tear you apart.
Balto ends up sounding generically nice, but to Kevin Bacon's credit, that's just what he was supposed to do. You really get the vibe for who these dogs are meant to be, and all elements of their characterization work in perfect harmony. Steel is considered to be the town's favorite, and he actively works towards Balto's ostracization. The half-breed is forced to live in isolation, and his friends also seem to be other outcasts. The main one is a goose named Boris, and I really appreciate their dynamic. He understands that Balto struggles with his identity, and he tries to make sure that his friend is okay, even if he doesn't always succeed at that. It is implied that Boris could migrate with the rest of his flock, but instead he chooses not to, specifically because he wants to look after his roommate. There's real concern being expressed here, and as unlikely as a friendship between a wolf dog and a bird can be, you really believe it. There's also these two polar bears who can't swim, and it turns out that they are the ones voiced by Phil Collins. So it's not a musical. Okay. Apparently, their designs were finalized before the casting was announced, so Phil came up with the voice based entirely on the art that had been created for them. If you ever wondered what the man was doing when he's not making you cry about a bear, he's busy voicing two of them. Anyway, the plot really kicks off when the village children start getting sick with diphtheria, and the hospital is out of antitoxin. They ask for more doses to be sent, but the weather stops all means of transportation except for dog sledding, and a race is organized to see which animals are the fastest. Once the actual team is put together, the kids are placed under quarantine and a lamp is lit up to guide the dogs back home, under the promise that for as long as the light is shining, there is still hope. Balto was actually the one to win the race, but the townspeople don't trust him enough to guide a sled. When the original Mush team led by Steel gets lost, Balto decides to search for them and bring them back home, despite knowing that even that might not be enough to make the village welcome him. He is initially accompanied by the rest of his gang, but after a deadly encounter with a black bear, he has to continue the journey alone as Boris and the Phil Collinses take care of an injured Jenna. Upon their separation, Boris tells Balto to trust his full identity, arguing that while a dog might not make it through, perhaps a wolf could. Let's talk about this wolf thing, though. It rules. Yeah, it makes little to no sense. Like, the villagers just seem to know that he's half wolf. What, did they see his parents getting together or something? What happened to the rest of his litter? Is Balto the only one? Wolf dogs were considered interesting enough to be kept in zoos for a while, and with the proper training and care, the town could make real good use of Balto's strength and abilities. But instead, they just kind of keep him around as the local stray. But like, it's freaking cool. What, wouldn't you like to be half wolf? I swear I'm not a furry. You can see that his half-breed origins bring Balto great distress. He's not wild enough to be a wolf, but not tame enough to be a regular dog.
All he knows is what he is not.
He feels as though his best bet is to be accepted by the town. He doesn't appear to be very interested in joining a pack, and there's also the question of whether or not he would even be welcome there to begin with. Every human seems to know of Balto and his backstory, but they only use that to shun him instead of valuing him, and it looks as though there is no place for someone like him anywhere. And don't we all love a good underdog story? Or, I guess, under-wolf dog in this case. Balto does find Steel's gang, but the husky is mad that he can't be the hero anymore, so he messes up the tracks that Balto left. Steel's plan succeeds, and the gang loses their way, with Balto and the medicine cargo falling off a cliff. Cutting back to town, Steel tells everyone that the mission failed and that Balto passed away. In the human side of the story, the news that the musher still hasn't been found weighs on their shoulders, and the guy turns off the lamp? Dude, what the heck? No, seriously, why would he do that? The kids are still alive. I know things are looking kind of grim right now, but declaring that all hope is lost seems like a bit of a jerk move. Alright, maybe I'm just saying this because I know it's a kid's film and that Balto's gonna make it, But even when I was younger, this gesture came to me as unnecessarily cruel. Out of all historical inaccuracies, I hope that one didn't actually happen in real life. Speaking of Balto though, he is currently going through the coolest scene in the entire movie. He awakens from his fall, half covered by snow, and is confronted by the ghostly figure of a white wolf. The creature calls for him, but Balto does not answer, still burdened by the uncertainties of his identity. It is only when he looks at the medicine crate that he is reminded of the true weight of his mission, and the words of his friend echo through his mind, stating that perhaps a wolf could make it out alive after all. Upon realizing his own footsteps match those of the beast before him, he fully comes to terms with his wolfdom, and they cry out in unison before he makes his journey back up. That's just beautiful. It gives me the chills every time I watch it. The snowstorm brings to this scene an otherworldly feeling, and the lack of dialogue leaves a lot to the interpretation in the best way possible. You have no way of knowing if the great wolf is real or if it's just a figment of Balto's imagination, or if the two of them are related at all. But you don't have to know. This is all the film needs to get the point across, and it's absolutely stunning. The music playing here is one of my favorite tracks, and it was scored by none other than James Horner, the guy who also did the music for Titanic. You feel absolutely hypnotized by it, and when Balto stands up tall, your very spirit is lifted along for the ride. The gang fights a bunch of natural disasters on their way home, but they make it out alive despite the perils, with Balto howling out in victory once he sees the village and— oh, now you light up the lamp again, huh? Freaking unbelievable. They get the antitoxin to the kids just in time, and Gnome is saved from the illness, with Steel being shunned for being a manipulative liar and with Balto being welcomed as a hero. Back in the real world, the grandmother finishes her tale and locates the statue with the kid, and it is revealed that the lady was Rosie all along, also known as one of the kids saved by the mission. Man, what a movie. Admittedly, part of my love for it comes from watching it a billion times as a kid, but I believe there's plenty of stuff here that's totally worthy of praise. Despite the individual journeys for each character, the element that ties it all together is the epidemic. There is no major villain trying to make the children get worse, it's just a really unfortunate situation. A town isolated by snow who ran out of medicine and is trying its best to save its population. The closest thing you have to a villain is just your local jerk, and his plan adds up to bullying some dog. The meat of the story is the serum run, and as far as missions go, saving the kids is one of the most noble possibilities for one. The sequence where Gnome cries out for help and all the other towns repeatedly try to send them the antitoxins, only to be stopped by the weather, is absolutely heartbreaking, and you really feel the terrible weight of this predicament. The music and the visuals and even the voice acting here get to me every time. Balto and Jenna's relationship is put on hold despite their mutual interest for one another because Rosie's illness takes the center stage, and they understand that there is a bigger issue at hand. Balto tries to help the other dogs not because he sees it as a way of getting Jenna's sympathy, but because he genuinely wants to help the town. There's this really interesting scene where Balto tries asking Jenna out, but he stops himself when he sees how distracted she is. He tries to ease her concerns by sneaking into the doctor's office so that she has a chance to get more information on Rosie's condition, and he tries to comfort her when they see how bad the situation is. It's pretty heavy. On the other hand, if I look down and I see 2 dogs sneaking through the vents of my hospital, I would flip out. Contrast this with Steele, who is there just to try to court Jenna and is completely incapable of reading the room. You can't even call this a love triangle because Jenna herself is not interested on the husky, and you really have to side with her here. While Balto drops the romantic subplot in favor of saving the kids, Steele hangs on to notions of personal glory and fails to see the bigger picture. Steele's evilness is honestly kinda hilarious. When the animated part of the movie begins, there's this dog race taking part with 2 sled teams, and Steele kind of cheats by trying to bite his rival's leg, causing the entire chain to fall apart. And when the whole debacle is done, the rival musher calls out Steele's name as a cry for revenge. Like, he's not screaming at the other musher. This man is yelling at a dog. Or when they're putting together the final mission team after Balto wins the race, and Steele walks around calling who's taking which position on the chain.
Okay, Nikki, Caltech, start moving. We're strapping up.
He's a dog. He can't order things around like that, can he? What authority does he even have here? Or when they're trying to make it back home, it seems like everyone's counting on Steele's sense of direction instead of taking orders from the actual musher. It's so over the top, especially when coupled with how evil Steele looks and moves at all times. And at some point, you kinda have to wonder why this is the way the movie was told. It's clearly not following the real story of the medicine run, with the talking animals and the evil dog and the half-wolf subplot. But then we cut back to the live-action sequence, and we remember that this is all a story being told by a grandmother to a little kid. And in many ways, it really feels like it. There's a touch of fantasy and lightheartedness that can only exist in the realm of fiction. And yet, the tale is still grounded enough to feel real. When you look at it through the perspective of it all being a story told by Rosie, you can even imagine that this is how she interpreted the world as a kid, far too young to understand the true implications of the reality that surrounds her. She was just making up cool stories about the dogs who saved her life. And now she gets to pass on those stories in order to entertain a kid who is just as young and imaginative. And for all absurd fictional elements, I really like the narrative they created. There's something rather touching about seeing Balto struggle with his identity throughout the film, only to have him fully accept himself in such a stunning way. He was only truly welcomed by the town once he came to terms with who he was, as if his public acceptance was only a mirror of the balance he had already found within. The budget for this movie wasn't all that high, and it's a shame that they failed to make it all back with the theatrical release. But even with the limitations they had, the crew tried their best to make their vision come to life. One of the concerns was that the film would look too boring from a color perspective, being just a bunch of dogs on the snow. So they made a point of showing the true colors of the Alaskan landscape, so easily overlooked and so brilliantly captured here. The actual history behind the 1925 Serum run is fascinating, even if the movie doesn't go too deep into it. The actual real-life celebrating of Balto as a symbol of the run is a touch controversial, though it's not really my place to condemn it here. But the film was never trying to pose itself as an accurate historical retelling. It might be something worth revisiting eventually, as other media examples try to do, and maybe even shed some light on native voices trying to share their history. But for now, I'll stick with this fictional version, as altered as it might be by the eyes of childhood wonder. I'm glad this film eventually found its audience, and I'm also glad that I got to be a part of the crowd. There will always be room in this world for tales of courage and self-acceptance, and if they've got some cool dogs in it, well, it's all the more reason to love them. Thank you for watching. Wow, hello there. It was very nice of you to watch this video. Special thanks to my beautiful Patreons for making videos like these possible. I love you all, now and forever. If you would like to join the gang, click the link in the description. If you have enjoyed the video, you can also help me out by clicking the like button, subscribing to the channel, and clicking the notification bell too. You can also follow me on Twitter and share this video with your friends. Feel free to leave a comment down below, especially if it is about how much you love Balto. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye!
Balto.
Big Paw's kinda running my family.
You know what they say about a guy with big feet?